It started with a single sound. Crack. One perfect gunshot rang out through the hot, heavy air. It sliced through the quiet like a knife, sharp, final, the kind of shot that makes people stop breathing for a second. A young girl, barely 10 years. Old, lay still on the shooting mat, a military rifle steady in her hands, her eyes focused, her breath calm. She didn't smile. She didn't look proud. She simply did what she came to do. A group of men in uniform stood behind her, but they weren't clapping. They weren't impressed. They were stunned. One man stepped forward, the oldest of them all, his chest heavy with medals, face carved from stone. His hand reached down, grabbed the rifle from the girl's hands, and yanked it away like she had just broken something. "Get out," he said. Not with a yell, not with anger, but with something colder, quieter, like something inside him had cracked. It wasn't that she hit the target that scared him. It was how she hit it. But to understand what just happened, you have to go back a little, to the silence before the shot, to a little girl named Maya and a promise made to a man she barely got to know, her father. 7 years ago, Maya lost him. He had been a soldier, a proud, skilled man who loved his country and loved his family. Even more, every year on his birthday, Maya and her mom would sit quietly in their small living room. They'd look through old photos, read the letters he left behind. But this year was different. This year, Maya asked for something else. Her father used to talk about a place, a shooting range where he trained, where he found peace. It was his favorite place on earth. But after he passed, that range closed its doors to Maya's mother. She wasn't welcome there, not as a widow, not as anything. Still, Maya wanted to go, just once, just one shot. On her father's lane, with his name echoing through the air. A final gift, a final goodbye. Her mom didn't want to go back there, not after how they were treated. But she saw the look in Maya's eyes, the same quiet strength her husband used to carry. So she agreed. They drove in silence that morning, the sky overcast, the wind still. When they arrived at the gate of the private range, a man stood waiting. A retired colonel, the kind of man who could stare you down without saying a word. His eyes scanned Maya's mother from head to toe. No fancy clothes, no luxury car. Number, invitation. "This is a private club," he said flatly. Maya's mother stayed calm. "My husband was a member, Sergeant David Hayes." At that name, the colonel's face tightened, not in respect, but in disgust. "Membership expires upon death," he said coldly. Maya stepped forward then, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was my daddy's last wish," she said. "Just one shot. For his birthday." The colonel looked down at her. Small girl, braids, too young to hold a rifle, too bold to speak, and he laughed. Not a funny laugh, not even a mean one. Just a short, dry sound that said, "You? Don't be ridiculous. Run along," he muttered. "Go play with your dolls." Her mother reached for her hand, heartbroken, ready to walk away. But Maya didn't move. She stood still, face steady. "I can shoot," she said quietly. The colonel raised an eyebrow. "I can shoot better than anyone here." The crowd behind him chuckled. The colonel's smile twisted. "All right," he said, thinking this would be a lesson the girl wouldn't forget. "Let's see what your daddy taught you." And with that, he led them deep into the range, past the regular lanes, all the way to the end, to a lane known only by one name, the execution range, a place where professionals tested their limits. He handed her a rifle built for real soldiers, not children. Heavy, intimidating. The others watched from behind the fence, whispering, laughing, but Maya didn't seem to notice. She lay down, adjusted the rifle, checked the chamber, and then, crack, that perfect shot echoed again. And silence fell. No one spoke. No one moved. What they saw in that moment wasn't a trick, or luck, or a fluke. It was the beginning of something much bigger than a little girl with a steady hand. It was the start of a truth that had been buried for too long. Finally waking up, and Maya was just getting started. The silence after Maya's first shot was heavy. Not just because it was perfect, but because no one expected it. Especially not him. The colonel stared at the target through narrowed eyes, then at the little girl lying still on the mat. He didn't say anything at first, just clenched his jaw so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. His hands, always firm, were now stiff at his sides. That wasn't a shot fired by a beginner. That was the kind of shot you only see from someone who knows exactly what they're doing, but he couldn't admit that he refused to dot so. He walked over, grabbed the rifle from her hands, like she didn't deserve to hold it, and told them to leave. Like it was all over. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't even close to over. Not for Maya Daw, and definitely not for her mother. Let's go back. Just a few hours before that shot, when Maya and her mom were still driving to the range, the road was long, quiet, lined with dry trees and the kind of silence that fills your chest. Maya sat in the back seat, holding a small folded piece of paper. Her fingers kept running over the edges. It was her father's handwriting, faded but still strong. Just a few lines, a birthday message, a final wish. To my girl, take the shot. You'll know when. That's all it said. But it was enough to bring them here, to a place her mother had sworn she'd never return to. The Oak Creek Marksman. Club. It wasn't a place for outsiders. It wasn't a place for people who didn't fit their idea of who should belong. Even when David Maya's father was alive and a member, people whispered. They smiled to his face, but not everyone respected him, and after his death, they closed the door completely. Still, Maya wanted to go. Not to prove something, but to honor something. So they drove, quietly, together. When they arrived, the gate was closed. But the colonel was already there, like he knew they were coming. He stood with his hands behind his back, eyes squinting at the car as it pulled. Up top before Maya or her mom could even speak, he stepped forward. This is a private facility, he said flatly. Maya's mother, holding her ground, replied calmly, my husband was a member. David Hayes, the name hit him. You could see it, but his expression didn't soften. It turned sharp, cold. I remember Hayes, he said. Membership is non-transferable. It ends when the member does. Those words hit hard, like David's. Life had just been reduced to an expired subscription. Maya's mother stood there, swallowing grief and pride, trying not to cry. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. Then Mia stepped out from behind her. She walked up, small and quiet, and looked the colonel in the eye. Today's my daddy's birthday, she said. He wanted me to fire one shot on his lane. That's all. The colonel looked down at her like she was nothing. Like she was something to step over, and then he laughed out. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Mean, you? He said, with a rifle? Don't be ridiculous. He waved them off with a smirk. Run along. Go play with your dolls. Maya's mother reached for her, ready to leave. But Maya didn't move. Her shoulders straightened. I can shoot, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't shake either. I can shoot better than anyone here. The colonel froze. So did everyone else within earshot. There was something in the way she said it. Not just confidence, something deeper. Like she wasn't bragging, she was stating a fact. The colonel turned to the other men nearby. They were club members, well-dressed, comfortable, all of them amused. He looked back at Maya. That same smug smile returned to his face. Well then, he said, let's give the girl her wish. But not because he believed in her, because he wanted to watch her fail. He didn't take her to a normal lane. No, he led her all the way to the edge of the property, to Range 7, a place so challenging even trained officers used it to test themselves. They called it the execution range, not because people got hurt, but because dreams did. It was where confidence came to die. He called over a few others. Quietly, with a wink, "Got a little prodigy over here," he joked. "Let's see what she's got." The men came with smiles on their faces, ready for a show. The colonel walked to a locked steel case and pulled out a military-grade rifle, heavy, long range, the kind that kicked back with force. He shoved it into Maya's hands. "There you go, little girl. Try not to shoot your foot off." The others chuckled. Maya's mom looked like she might cry. But then, something strange happened. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't fumble. Her hands moved like they'd done this before. Like they knew what every part of that weapon was made for. She adjusted the scope. Checked the bolt. Took a deep breath. And slowly, she laid down on the mat. The laughter faded. Even the colonel stopped smiling. He didn't know it yet, but he had just given her the very thing she needed. A loaded weapon and a reason to use it. Not for violence. Not for revenge, but for truth. And the next time she pulled that trigger, the world wouldn't just hear a bullet. They'd hear a story finally beginning. The moment Maya laid down on the mat, everything changed. The wind seemed to still. The laughter faded into silence. Even the colonel, so smug just moments before, felt something twist in his chest. He had handed her a weapon meant for men twice. Her size, a long, heavy sniper rifle designed to challenge professionals. The recoil alone could knock most kids back. He thought she would fumble, cry, give up. But Maya's hands didn't shake. She adjusted the shoulder pad. Shifted the bipod legs like she'd done it 100 times. Checked the chamber. Her small fingers moved smooth, certain. Like muscle memory. Like she belonged there. A few feet behind her, her mother stood frozen, one hand over her mouth. The other gripping a folded photo of her husband. She couldn't speak, couldn't blink. She had seen Maya practice for years in their backyard, but this was different. This was real. And Maya? She was calm, not nervous, not scared. Focused. The colonel noticed it too. That eerie calm. That steady breath. That quiet confidence no child should have. He cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "Any time now," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Take your shot." But Maya didn't rush. She looked downrange far down the line at his steel. Target nearly hidden by the glare of the sun. She didn't blink. She was reading the wind, watching the flags, breathing slow. In and out, like her father had taught her. Back when they practiced, her dad would whisper, "The world can scream, but in here," he'd press her chest gently. "We stay calm." She exhaled one last time and squeezed the trigger. Crack. The sound cut through the air like lightning, sharp, final. The crowd flinched. The colonel squinted at the target, dead center, a perfect bullseye. For a second, no one spoke. Then came the sound of someone dropping their coffee cup. A soft clatter that echoed louder than any words. The colonel blinked, then blinked again. Surely it was a fluke, a lucky shot. Beginner's luck? Nothing more. But before he could say anything, Maya had already pulled the bolt, ejected the shell, and chambered a new round. Crack. Another bullseye, half an inch from the first. Now the crowd started to murmur. One man leaned closer to the others. "Did you see that grouping?" He whispered. A third shot followed. Then a fourth. Perfect. Precise. Deadly. This wasn't luck. This was skill. Unreal skill and something else. Something few of them could explain. One of the members, an older veteran, tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "Wait a minute," he muttered. "That pattern, that shooting rhythm, I've seen that before." He turned to another man beside him. "That's the Aries sequence." The other man's eyebrows shot up. "No way," he said. "Only special ops guys know that one. It's top-level classified. She's just a kid." But the grouping was too exact. The pause between each shot was too familiar. It wasn't random. Maya was shooting a deliberate pattern down to the breath. And suddenly, the colonel knew. He'd seen that same sequence once before. 7 years ago, during the trials that should have made David Hayes a legend, the colonel's hands curled into fists dot because if she was repeating that exact pattern, that meant one terrifying thing. She knew what happened back then. Maybe not everything, but enough. She wasn't just here to honor her father. She was here to send a message. The colonel's jaw tightened. His gaze locked on Maya, but she didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed on the target, calm, focused. Her father used to say that shooting wasn't about anger or speed. It was about control. About knowing when to hold your breath and when to release. And right now, the colonel felt the grip of that control slipping from his hands. Behind him, the men who had gathered to laugh were no longer amused. Their phones were out, recording, streaming, capturing the moment, capturing the impossible. "This isn't a trick," someone whispered. "She's doing it." Maya didn't hear them. She was deep in it now. That zone where everything else falls away. Just her, the rifle, and the wind. Another shot. Another. Every one perfect. Behind her, her mother's eyes had filled with tears. Not of fear anymore, but pride, because now the world was seeing what she had always known. Maya wasn't just talented. She was trained, carefully, lovingly, by a man who gave everything he had, including his final days to prepare her for this moment. The colonel took a step forward, his lips parting like he was about to stop her, but he didn't. He couldn't, because for the first time in a long time, he was afraid, not of the girl, but of the truth. And Maya? She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't afraid of any of them. She had already taken her shot, and now the silence was theirs to carry. The crowd had grown. What started as a few men chuckling behind a fence had now turned into a silent ring of onlookers, dozens of them. Some club members, some visiting veterans, a few active duty soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, not blinking. Everyone's eyes were locked on the same thing. A child with a rifle. Not just any child. A 10-year-old girl who was rewriting everything they thought they knew about skill, control, and what legacy really looked like. The shots kept coming. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one landed with surgical precision. Tight groupings, flawless. Rhythm, like a symphony played in steel and smoked out. By now, the colonel had stopped pretending to smile. His smugness was gone. So was the condescension. What replaced it was fear. He had seen this before. Not just once, but exactly once. 7 years ago, a secret trial. A performance no one was ever supposed to see again. David Hayes, that name now rang in the colonel's head like an alarm bell. He remembered it too well. The man who almost stole everything from him. The man who didn't just shoot like a soldier, but like an artist. A ghost. A legend. And now, right in front of him, his daughter was recreating it. Every pause. Every angle, every breath between shots. It wasn't just a tribute. It was a mirror, shot for shot. Sequence for sequence. The colonel's palms began to sweat. Not from heat. From recognition. "She's repeating the Aries pattern," someone in the crowd whispered. Another nodded slowly, brows furrowed. "That's not possible. Only 5 people in the country even know the full sequence." And one of them was Sergeant Hayes, the first man added. And he was disqualified, wasn't he? A ripple of suspicion began to move through the watching crowd. The colonel could feel it. Not just the eyes on Maya, but now eyes on him. He turned and barked. "Phones away, no more recording." His voice tried to carry weight, but it didn't land like before. The men didn't obey. They just kept filming, because deep down they knew they were watching something historic, something raw, something true. And the colonel, he was no longer the trusted guardian of this place. He was the man trying to keep a secret buried. Maya reloaded again, calm as ever. To her, none of this mattered. Not the whispers, not the colonel, not even the growing weight of her father's name. What mattered was the next shot. And then the next. And the one after that. Her focus was so complete, it was almost frightening. The rifle didn't shake. Her breathing was measured. Her grip dash flawless. Each time her fingers squeezed the trigger. It was like another piece of a puzzle fell into place. The men behind her weren't laughing anymore. They were leaning in, their bodies tense, like they were afraid to even breathe too loud. For some, it brought pride. For others, shame, because they had doubted her, mocked her, wrote her off before she even touched the trigger. But Maya didn't shoot for them. She shot for one reason. To speak a language? No. One could ignore, and she spoke it beautifully. One of the instructors on the range, a quiet man who had kept to himself, moved slowly toward Maya's mother. He looked pale, nervous, but something in him had shifted too. He recognized the name Hayes. More than that, he had been there. He leaned in close and whispered, "Ma'am, I knew your husband. I was at the Ares trials." She turned to him, stunned. "I didn't know what the colonel did back then," he continued, voice barely above the wind. "But I know now, and I kept something. Something you might need." He reached into his pocket and pressed a small silver USB drive into her hand. "Proof," he said simply. "The real scores. Testimonies. Everything." She stared down at it, her hand trembling. For years, she'd fought to uncover what really happened. And now, in the middle of a shooting range, her daughter's hands steady on a rifle. A stranger had just handed her the missing piece. Behind them, another shot rang out, then another. And another. A symphony of truth. The colonel took a shaky breath. His world was falling apart one bullet at a time. He turned, desperate to shut it down, to stop the noise, to stop the attention, but he had already lost control. Because Maya didn't come here to compete. She came to reveal. To bring back a name the world had been told to forget. To show that what was stolen would not stay buried. To prove that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. And as the last shell casing dropped gently to the ground, the colonel knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Maya's hands never slowed. Another bullet slid into the chamber. Another shot rang out. Her small frame barely moved with the recoil now. Her rhythm was steady, her breathing calm. Like she had done this 1,000 times before. Because she had. Not on a military range like this one. Not with men watching and whispering. But in a backyard. A small patch of grass behind a rented home. Where the air smelled like laundry and summer dust. Not gunpowder. Where memories lived in silence. Where a little girl and her mother had built something invisible, a bridge to a man they could no longer see. Most people thought Maya's skill came from talent. DIDN, single quotes T. It came from grief, from years of lonely nights and quiet tears, from her mother reading journal entries out loud, while Maya cleaned her homework off the kitchen table. From a man's handwritten notes, dozens of them folded inside a shoebox, filled with equations, wind patterns, breathing, exercises, and detailed descriptions of a competition the world had erased from memory. His journals were more than training logs. They were love letters, not to war, not to pride. But to his daughter, to the person he hoped she'd become. After her father died, people told Maya's mom to move on, to focus on healing, but healing didn't mean forgetting. And every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the look in David's face the night before he left for his last deployment. He knew something. He knew he might not come back. That's why he wrote the letters. That's why he kept records. That's why he left behind a trail for them to follow. So they did. Each evening, after Maya finished her schoolwork, they went out to the yard. Her mother set up tin cans at different distances. They practiced stances, breathing, timing. They used a .22 rifle specially modified to match the weight and feel of a full military weapon. They didn't call it training. They called it talking. To Dad, her mom would read a line from one of David's journals. Then Maya would take her shot. She missed a lot at first, but she never gave up because this wasn't about being good. It was about getting close. Closer to him, closer to the truth. The shooting wasn't what made Maya dangerous. What made her dangerous was that she remembered not just the man, not just the love. She remembered what he told them about his last trial, the test he almost won, the one the Colonel ruined. Officially, they said he had a stress breakdown during the Ares trials, that he lost focus, that he wasn't stable, but that wasn't the man Maya knew. That wasn't what his journal said, and it wasn't what her heart told her either. The closer she got to mastering his sequence, the same series of shots the Colonel had tried to bury, the more clearly she understood her father had been silenced, not for failing, but for winning. The Colonel didn't fear David's mistakes. He feared his perfection. Because if David had won the trials, if he had brought home that medal, if his name had made the headlines, people would have started asking questions. About the contracts, the money, the burn pits, the truth. So the Colonel did the only thing he could. He made sure David never fired that last shot. And when the news came back, David's family was told he cracked, that his disqualification was for his own safety, that it was for the best. But Maya never believed it. And her mother? She knew better, because just before he died sick and weak from a disease, no one could explain. David made her promise one thing: when the time is right, let her show them who she is. So when Maya asked to go to the range on his birthday, her mother knew the time had come. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. Every bullet Maya fired wasn't just for her father. It was for the truth, for the silence they were forced to carry, for the name they were told to forget. Behind them, the instructor who had slipped them the USB stood still, eyes locked on the girl. He saw what she was doing, shot by shot, line by line. She's not just copying the pattern, he whispered. She's finishing it. The Colonel heard him. His heart skipped because he knew what came next. The final shot. The one David never got to take. The one that had been erased from the records. The one too far, too complex, too impossible. The one even he had never made. Mia was going to try it. The one bullet that could unmake a lie. The one shot that could restore a name. And as Maya adjusted her body for the final round, the entire range fell into complete silence. No laughter. No whispers. Only the sound of wind. And the weight of a father's legacy. Resting quietly in his daughter's hands, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden lines across the ground. The shadows stretched quietly across the shooting range, brushing up against boots and rifle bags. In silence, everyone was watching. The men who had once laughed now stood with their arms crossed, their faces frozen, their phones still recording, their breathing shallow. Some had served in wars, others had never seen a battlefield. But every single one of them knew what they were witnessing wasn't just a display of skill. This was something different. This was history being corrected, one breath at a time. Maya stood slowly. She wasn't in a hurry. She didn't need to be. She brushed a bit of dust from her pants and walked to her small shooting bag. Her fingers unzipped the front pocket and pulled out an old folded photograph. The edges were soft and curled. The colors faded. Her father's face smiled back at her, calm, gentle, proud. But Maya didn't stare at his eyes. She didn't cry. She turned the photo over and looked at the back. There, written in fading ink, was a cluster of numbers and hand-sketched lines. Wind calculations, distance adjustments, elevation math. Something most grown men couldn't solve without a computer. But David Hayes had solved it. He had solved it for this shot. For the last target. The one no one ever hit. The one at the farthest end of the valley, beyond a stretch of trees and shifting wind currents. The one even the Colonel had never struck, not in 20 years. They called it the impossible shot. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. If she made this one, the story would explode. Not just here, but everywhere. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. This was about her father, his honor, the legacy someone tried to erase. And right now, The entire weight of that legacy sat quietly in her small hands. Maya dropped to the mat again. But this time, everything felt heavier. The silence was deeper. Even the birds seemed to pause. She adjusted the rifle. Took a long breath in, let it out slow. Then looked back down at the numbers. The flags across the range whipped in opposite directions. The wind wasn't consistent. That's all. Her mom stepped forward now. Just a little. She didn't speak, but her voice rang loud in that stillness. Her father could make that shot, she said softly, so all could hear, and so can she. The colonel's jaw tensed. His eyes flared wide. No, he barked, stepping forward. That shot is restricted. That sequence is classified. You don't have clearance? But no one moved. No one stopped her, because no one could. The colonel's voice no longer held power here. It had shrunk beneath the weight of truth. Maya looked one last time at her father's handwriting. Then she pressed the photo against her chest and closed her eyes. She remembered their backyard. She remembered the nights when her mother whispered. Through tears and her father's words floated in the breeze like ghosts. The rifle is just a tool. Sweetheart, he used to say, the real weapon is your breath. She inhaled. Steady. Deep. And dot. And out. She opened her eyes. She saw the target, no bigger than a coin. Across a wide valley. She adjusted her elbows, tightened her shoulders. Her finger curled over the trigger, and in the space between two heartbeats, she fired. Crack. But it didn't sound like the other shots. It didn't feel like them either. This one didn't punch. It sang. The bullet soared into the valley. No one could follow it. No one could see it, but they could feel it moving. Like fate, like gravity finding its home for a long moment. Silence. Then dash ping. It was faint. Soft. But unmistakable. The sound of lead kissing steel. The impossible shot had just landed. The crowd didn't cheer at first. They couldn't. They were too stunned. It was too much. Too perfect. Too full of meaning. Phones trembled in hands. Mouths hung open. Eyes filled. And then, behind them, the giant digital monitor that usually displayed club announcements flickered to life, but it wasn't an announcement. It was a new image. Live feed from a small camera mounted on the target. It showed a single perfect dimple right at the center of the plate. Like a fingerprint. Proof. She had done it. She had gone beyond what anyone thought possible. And in that moment, Maya didn't smile. She didn't stand up or bow or wave. She simply closed her eyes again and laid the rifle down, because she didn't come to celebrate. She came to complete something. To finish what her father was never allowed to. Behind her, the colonel finally moved, but it wasn't with confidence. It was with panic. He spun toward the monitor, but something else appeared. Document. A scan. A top-secret military scorecard. David Hayes' name at the top. Beside it. A perfect score. Below it, the colonel's name with a score that wasn't even close. A red stamp next to David's line. Disqualified. Medical review. Crowd leaned closer. Another file appeared. A signed testimony. A voice from the past. Colonel Thompson altered the scores. Hayes was perfect. He was disqualified out of jealousy. And then an audio clip began. The colonel's own voice, snarling, "Say a word about what happened to Hayes, and your career is over." The air shifted. Everyone turned to him. He had nowhere to run. The girl they mocked had not just hit a target, she had hit a truth, and it could no longer be ignored. The truth was no longer hiding. It was glowing on the giant, screamed like a spotlight on a stage, and standing under that light, exposed and shrinking by the second, was the colonel. The man who once ruled this range like a king was now just a man cornered by his own silence. The evidence was right there. The real scorecard, the witness testimonies, the secret audio recordings with his voice, threatening careers, erasing records, rewriting history. The range, once filled with quiet superiority, had turned into a courtroom, and Muia had become its loudest witness. Phones were still recording, The story was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Hashtag the girl who shot truth, hashtag Hayes legacy, hashtag justice. On the range, the colonel lunged toward the control booth in a desperate blur, trying to pull the USB from the computer to stop the images and audio still flashing across the screen. But someone stepped in front of him. Maya's mother. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't scream. She just looked at him. Face calm, shoulders steady, and he stopped because in her eyes, he saw what he had spent years trying to destroy. Strength. Not the kind that fires. Bullets. The kind that survives them. She didn't need to say much, but what she did say landed. Like a final blow. You didn't just steal his medal, she said, voice low but clear. You stole his name. You let people think he failed. You let our daughter grow up believing the world forgot him. But today, she stepped aside and looked at Maya. Today, the world remembers. The colonel looked at the crowd. At the men he used to command. Not one of them stood with him. They were silent, disgusted, shaken, and then came the sirens. Faint at first, but growing louder. 2 military police trucks rolled in through the gate, their arrival as sharp and final as a gavel. A soldier approached, Colonel Richard Thompson. He said, "You are being taken into custody under suspicion of falsifying military records, obstruction of justice, and contract fraud." The colonel tried to speak, but the words didn't come. He looked once more at Maya, now standing with the rifle slung at her side, still calm, still unshaken, and in that moment, he saw not a little girl. He saw every lie he ever told unraveling. Before his eyes, they led him away in handcuffs. No one clapped. No one cheered, but it didn't feel like silence. It felt like justice. 3 weeks later, the sun hung high over a military parade ground where rows of soldiers stood in perfect formation. Flags flapped gently in the breeze. At the front of the stage stood a general, his face serious and eyes heavy. He spoke to the crowd, but his words were meant for 2 people. A mother and her daughter. "We are here today," he said, not just to award a medal, but to correct a mistake, to honor the legacy of a soldier who gave everything, and who was betrayed not by enemies, but by silence. He called the name Sergeant David Hayes. A respectful silence followed. Then the general looked down at Maya, now standing at the base of the stage in a simple white dress, her hands clasped in front of her. He knelt and with careful hands, he presented her with the Ares Trials Medal of Valor. The same medal her father had earned, the one that had been stolen. Maya didn't look at the camera, flashes, or the shining gold. She looked at her mother, who was crying, but this time the tears weren't grief. They were released. 1 week later, Maya and her mother stood at the cemetery. The headstone had been replaced. Where once it said only a name and a date, now it told the truth. Sergeant David Hayes, hero. Father, unbeaten champion. Maya stepped forward and placed the medal at the base of the stone. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She reached into her pocket and took out the old photograph, the one with the faded equation on the back. And gently, she tucked it into the earth. Then she stepped back. Beside her mother, they didn't say goodbye. They said thank you. The world would go on. Headlines would fade. But those who were there would never forget the day a little girl walked onto a shooting range, faced on a wall of disbelief, and fired the truth back into history. Maya wasn't trained to fight. She wasn't trained to win medals. She was trained to remember. And in doing so, she became something no bullet could silence, a living legacy, because her father didn't teach her to be a soldier. He taught her to be a key that would one day unlock a truth too heavy for the world to carry, but just right for a little girl with steady hands and a heart full of purpose.